Captain 40 here. Let me warn you, you've been thunderstruck. Have you seen the new Netflix series by Greg Whiteley? I mean, this is amazing on America's Sweethearts, the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders, DCC. And this young woman in particular, Reese, she is mesmerizing. You cannot take your eyes off her. When she dances, you cannot look anywhere else but at her. And her theory, her belief in what she's doing is, I don't want you to look at me. I want you to see Jesus. Right? She is dancing for Jesus. She is incredibly mesmerizing. And apparently she's a virgin, right? She's marrying the first guy that she's ever dated, right? She has absolutely no experience with men from the story presented in DCC, right? The Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders. And my God, I just couldn't take my eyes off her or this whole series. It was absolutely mesmerizing. And the dances that they would do, like Thunderstruck to that great AC/DC song. My God, where they're doing the splits to Thunderstruck. I mean, they jump up and then they just do the splits. It's incredibly challenging. My God. Right, they jump up and then they fall down and do the splits. Right, see here on the left of my screen. Right, America's Sweethearts is the name of the documentary series. It's on. So they jump up and then they come down. They fall on their legs and between their legs, and wow! I mean, they come out to the AC/DC song Thunderstruck. I mean, what a way to get started. And so I'm watching this series, and so much of the fervor around the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders and the Dallas Cowboys, it reminds me of the same kind of fervor that I know, experienced, and have lived in Orthodox Judaism. Like, this is the equivalent of Orthodox Judaism. This is the hero system for many people, particularly in Dallas. I'm a Dallas Cowboy fan, but my God, Thunderstruck, this is their hero system, right? The same kind of devotion that people in my Orthodox Jewish community put into Orthodox Judaism, right? They put into the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders. They hardly get paid anything, all right? They get about $500 a game, and then they have opportunities for some promotional work, and so maybe they make about $60,000 a year if they do all the opportunities. All right, so virtually all of them have to work full-time jobs, right? They work full-time jobs, and then they have to practice 3-4 hours a night, right? Not a lot of time to sleep. And when they come out, they have to be on. It's like, bow, Thunderstruck, right? They have to be alive and put out a certain image and like the energy and the devotion, and then the physical damage to your body, like jumping up in the air like that and then coming down on your crotch. I mean, please try it yourself. Like, jump up in the air, then come down doing the full splits, landing on your crotch, and tell me how that works for you. So a lot of the women have to have hip surgery and other physical surgery. So what kind of woman would risk serious injury and make no money? All right, would she be a mentally healthy woman? And some of the women are very impressive. There's this one woman who's like the lead cheerleader, and she's a full-time nurse. So she impressed me, right? There were definitely some who impressed me, but then for others, it was obviously a dysfunction. And so they reminded me a lot of the girls who would do porn because they didn't feel beautiful. This seems to be the underlying psychological truth behind many of these DCC, Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders. They didn't feel beautiful growing up, and this is a way that they can feel beautiful and desired, even though it comes with tremendous downsides, right? Getting stalked, getting groped, getting harassed, and having to do this work for virtually free, right? And not being able to sleep, all right? You don't get enough sleep, all right? You are many times more likely to get in a serious car accident, to make bad decisions with your health. So some of the women seem really unhealthy. They seem to have significant eating issues. Some of the women seem incredibly impressive. On the face of it, I don't understand how anyone could play tackle football. I mean, just the downsides of the injury the impact, the devastation to your cognitive abilities, right? So playing tackle football, I can't comprehend it. And then cheerleading for virtually no money and doing great physical damage to yourself. There were a lot of older cheerleaders who show up in the documentary, and few of them age well. Few of them age well. They almost all look back on their time in DCC as the most exciting point of their lives. This is the highlight of their life. And so some of them are incredibly impressive. I was really impressed by the two women running DCC. I mean, their attention to detail, like the makeup, the you know, what's going on with each performer. Like, how is she looking? Is she showing enthusiasm? Are her kicks, you know, when she's kicking up, you know, she's kicking up basically to her face and above. Just amazing feats of athletic exuberance that they show, and then the psychological glow that they give out, the sense of excitement that they engender. They're a key part of Americana, right? They bring joy to hundreds of thousands of men. America's Sweethearts on Netflix. All right, I strongly recommend this show. All right, I'm just thinking about this. Tell me if I'm way off. All right, a blockade is an act of law. And I'm starting to think these pro-Palestine protesters at UCLA, outside a Dallas Torah synagogue on Sunday, and all around America, when they're protesting, they're not primarily protesting. They are not primarily protesters. They are people engaged in a blockade, right? They are creating blockades so that Jews cannot have normal access to their own private Jewish facilities, nor to public facilities, nor to moving freely. And so in international law, a blockade is an act of war, right? And how would you feel if you came home and your home was blockaded off? You need to get to the hospital, but your street is blockaded off. You need to get to work, and if you don't work, you don't get paid, and your route to work is blocked by protesters, right? You need life-saving medical treatment, but you can't get it because of these kind of pro-Palestine blockades. To me, creating a blockade in a first world country illegally is worthy of the death penalty. Like, tell me if I'm off base here, right? You don't allow people to engage in their normal lives, to get medical help, to go to church or synagogue. And these blockaders, they were also disrupting the synagogue during prayer services. So it wasn't just something about a land sale. And I don't get the drama about, was this land sale in occupied West Bank territory, right? All land is disputed, right? Because people don't emerge out of the land, right? All land, all countries are created in large part by ethnic cleansing, right? A people take over, right? They have the military power and the effectiveness to take over a particular plot of land and then to maintain and defend it, right, against other groups who also have claims to the land. So all those people who are on the side of Palestinians, right, how would you feel if your access to life-necessary medical care, your access to income, your ability to support your family was blockaded by another group who also has claims to the land that you live on, right? Other groups have claims to the land that you live on right now, just as strong as the Palestinians. So what unites all these groups who claim land that's occupied by another entity, right? What unites all these groups is that they are losers, right? They lost out in the fight for establishing and protecting and defending a particular spot of land. So the land that you are on right now is occupied land, right? Other groups, other people have a claim to your land, and they have just as strong a claim as the Palestinians, right? They're all united by losing, just not being particularly effective at creating their own state, right? The Palestinians were never able to create a state. The Arabs who lived in the land that is now known as Israel, right? Not particularly high IQ bunch, not a particularly effective bunch, just another group who loses and loses out to more effective, more intelligent, and more productive, right? Just people who operate at a higher level. All right, so let's have a look at breaking points. So I have a positive predisposition towards this independent news commentary show, Breaking Points. So let's see what they think the lies are. So for me, the lie that just jumped out at me to about 20 minutes ago is that these protesters are not primarily protesters, right? If they were just protesting, right, there'd be very little opposition, right? The opposition is to them blockading normal access to public and private space, right? Preventing people from living their lives through illegal behavior, right? To me, a blockade is an act of war. You are asking for the death penalty, right? You blockade enough people, you're going to get killed, right? You go out there and you just start blockading people. You prevent people from leaving their home. You go out there, prevent people from entering their home. You get out there, prevent people from going to church, going to synagogue, going to a mosque, going to a work. You prevent people from supporting their family. You prevent people from getting an education. You prevent people from going to see grandma or going to see their friends, right? You prevent people from their volunteer opportunities or their professional or social opportunities. You go out there and you prevent enough of this, right? You get out there and blockade, and at a certain point, people will rightly and naturally snap, and you'll be killed, right? There's not an infinite amount of blockading that you can engage in without people fighting back. And by and large, the police are going to be incredibly slow to respond to your blockading. So if you're being blockaded by people engaged in these illegal protests that are blockading you from earning a living, supporting your family, getting an education, then you're going to have to break the blockade yourself or with your own in-group, right? If you wait for the police to create room, right, you're going to lose hours and hours and hours of your life if the police ever act. Right, the police are much more interested in, quote unquote, establishing the perimeter. Right, they don't want to do this kind of hard work. So either you and your in-group break the blockade and create incentives for people not to blockade your in-group, all right, or you allow your life to be limited, diminished, wrecked, even destroyed. Right. So which way, man? Do you want to allow people to just blockade you from conducting a normal life, right? To me, this is a death penalty act, whether the death penalty is carried out judiciously, juridically, or through some other means extra juridically, right? You blockade enough people from supporting their family, living their life, right? You're going to cop it. Right. So to me, that's the biggest media lie that just occurred to me about media coverage of these pro-Palestine protests. What makes them controversial and what infuriates people is not the protests, it is the blockading, which, according to international law, is an act of war.
I wanted to bring you an update on this protest that happened in Los Angeles. So the protest, which no one...
Okay, it wasn't a protest. It was a blockade. It prevented people from walking down the street, going into synagogue, conducting their life. All right, it wasn't a protest, right? That's like saying, describing an act of rape as an act of sex, right? The important thing about an act of rape is not that it was a sexual act, but that it was a violation of a person, right? So if you told me that you're going to die unless you get to touch the breasts of this young female presenter right now, I would say better that you die, right? I believe that's the Talmudic position. So it's not as though you get to do anything, right? You get out there and violate people, then you deserve a very strong recompense. And so these are not protests, they are blockades.
The media will apparently tell you was in the context of a real estate event at a synagogue where they...
It was a real estate event at a synagogue. Now, your particular hero system may regard a real estate event that sells land in the West Bank is somehow heinous, but there's no objective reason to think that. It's no more heinous than selling a home. If you own a home in Washington, D.C., right, you're a colonizer, you're a settler, other people had possession of that land before you. They can make just as strong a case that you're an occupier and a settler and an imperialist as the Palestinians can do about the Jewish state. All right, either way, you're going to be attacked by people who lose at life, right? People who are not savvy enough, who are not intelligent enough, and are not effective enough to create and protect their own land.
They were selling off stolen land in the West.
There's no inherent reason. the stolen land on the West Bank, right? Israel was attacked by 5 Arab armies. Israel fought back, right? And it won, right? Fighting back and winning is not illegal. And usually when countries are attacked, right, and they fight back and they take some of the attacker's territory, right, you can make a legal case that that's illegal, but it's not some objective definition of illegality, all right? That's just your own peculiar hero system. And Israel was attacked in 1967. They fought back against 5 Arab armies, and they won. And as part of their victory, they took back land from the attackers. And Israel would be glad for all the Arabs in Israel, all the Arabs in the West Bank, and all the Arabs in Gaza to leave, right? Move a few miles to other people who share your language and share your religion. Like, get the hell out.
Bank, exclusively available, by the way, to Jewish people. Now, in America, a restrictive covenant.
Oh, okay. So this is land just available to Jewish people. Well, guess what? Yeah, that's technically against the law, but it happens all the time in America. Law isn't just something that's on the books, right? There are all sorts of communities where people only sell to a certain type of person, right? So, yeah, it's technically against the law in the United States, but it's how any neighborhood maintains itself, by breaking the law and being judicious about who you sell to.
Are illegal. You can't say this neighborhood is for whites only anymore, but in Israel you can say.
And yet many neighborhoods do something very similar to that, right? You have Asian neighborhoods, Black neighborhoods, Latino neighborhoods, Chinese American neighborhoods, and white neighborhoods all throughout America, because people practice this very thing that you're condemning, because it's normal, natural, and often healthy.
This neighborhood is for Jews only. And so there's been a series of these real estate events. There was one in Teaneck, New Jersey.
In Jewish neighborhoods, Jews, by and large, do not sell their homes to non-Jews so that they can maintain the character of their neighborhood. And in Black and Latino neighborhoods, right, they engage in massive amounts of crime to keep out outsiders. So I think between murdering people and raping people and robbing people and severely injuring people, choosing not to sell to a member of an outgroup is a pretty nice thing to do to preserve your neighborhood, as opposed to the crime that goes on in many Black and Latino neighborhoods that try to prevent outsiders from moving in.
Jersey, there have been some in Canada. This was the latest happening in LA. And so protesters showed up to protest this event. Counter protesters also showed up, and the whole thing, as the cops are just standing by and letting it happen, devolves into chaos and violence. We'll give you a little bit of a taste of that. You know, you've got, I don't know who's who, who's instigating, etc. I can tell you there were journalists who had their...
Okay, cops stand by and let it happen. The more difficult you make it for cops to do their job, and the mainstream media and all sorts of Fortune 500 companies that subsidize Black Lives Matter have made it substantially more difficult for cops to do their job, right? And so as a result of that, you have less assertion by cops, and you have a lot more crime, and you have a lot more dislocation, right? And you have more rule by thugs, right? And this is an example of rule by thugs blocking access, and the police are going to be highly reluctant to act in these situations because our elites have created all these incentives to diminish police enthusiasm for doing their jobs, because when the police do their jobs, it has a disparate impact because certain groups commit disproportionate numbers of crimes.
One journalist who had his phone stolen by a pro-Israel protester. I also want to mention that there were protests outside of that Teaneck, New Jersey synagogue real estate event as well.
And was that journalist who had his phone stolen, was he a member of Antifa? Right, because a lot of members of Antifa pose as journalists, but they are communists bent on, political activism, which is absolutely legal, right? But are they primarily journalists? Is journalists an accurate way to describe them? Right. All this violence happened because the pro-Palestine people engaged in illegal behavior, blocking access. It's not because they were protesting, right? People didn't get beaten up. People didn't get their phones stolen because the pro-Palestine crowd was just protesting the sale of illegal land, right? We had a brawl because the only way that Jews could continue on with their lives at this particular place, right, with what they were planning to do, is if they physically broke the blockade that was established by the pro-Palestine crowd. And this is a frequent tactic by the pro-Palestine crowd. They stop Jews from entering Jewish facilities, public facilities, just prevent Jews from having freedom of movement. And the only way the Jews can get to where they want to go is to physically bust up these blockades, right? So these pro-Palestine people are instigating violence, right? When you create a situation where violence is the only solution, right, aside from just accepting defeat or waiting for hours until the police doing something, then you are the one who is pushing the event towards violence.
As well. And those remain peaceful because the cops kept the two sides separated. So there have been, this isn't even the first time that protests have erupted at this thing. Okay, so that is what it looked like. Let me show you the poster of the real estate event that was, for what was occurring at this synagogue. They say, come and meet representatives of housing projects in all the best Anglo neighborhoods in Israel.
Anglo means they speak English, right? She wants to imply there's something sinister of wanting to buy property among people who speak English. Oh, how scary, how evil, right? You want to be able to talk to your neighbors. My God, people who want to talk to their neighbors. I remember Los Angeles Mayor Antonio Villaraigosa instructing us at Sinai Temple to go out and talk to someone who doesn't speak our language. Well, you can't talk to someone who doesn't speak your language. Right? It's normal, natural, and healthy to want to live among people who speak your language.
And again, this group, the My Home in Israel real estate company, they offer properties that are for sale in the occupied West Bank. And, this is illegal by international law.
According to some interpretations of international law, all right, the reason that Israel has the West Bank is because 5 Arab nations attacked it and they lost, all right? So it's fine. There's no inherent reason that losers are superior or inferior to winners, right? So this lady here on Breaking Point, she wants to side with the losers, but the very place that she lives, right, other losers have every bit as much of a claim to where she lives as the Palestinians do to land in Israel or in the West Bank.
Probably illegal in U.S. law, too, certainly against U.S. policy, et cetera. The way this was covered in the press.
No, it's not illegal to buy land in the West Bank on U.S. law, right? And at this event, at most, there was one property that was on the West Bank, right? The overwhelming number of the properties that were offered at this event were in Israel proper. And so every spot on earth is disputed, right? You can argue any land in the world is stolen because all land in the world is stolen because nobody grew up out of the land. Nobody has any inherent right to a particular spot of land. The only right you get is that which you are capable and effective enough to seize and to defend, right? And so there are some people who just tend to side with brown losers against white winners, right? And I can understand the social cachet from that. I can understand it's a dominant communist ideology among many of our elites that brown people are always the victims of white people. I'm more interested in trying to understand how winners win. Right? That's kind of my outlook on life. How do winners win? I want to know what's effective and what's ineffective, ill effective. And so this lady, she wants to side with the losers, and she wants to hype up what they were doing as something that was, very, very noble. They were just protesting, and they weren't protesting. They were blockading. They were preventing normal operation of Jewish life in Pico Robertson.
Was so incredibly dishonest. It was unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Yeah, I agree, because these protesters are called protesters, and what they're doing is creating such an intense blockade on the ability of Jews in particular to lead their lives that violence is inevitable, all right? They are instigating and creating a situation where there will have to be violence and people will die, and people have died because of these type of what's called protests.
Well, actually, it's totally believable in par for the course, honestly, of the way that they,
I'll tell you, Crystal,
the way that they approach it.
Because so I check in, I log in. I was like, okay, wow. I was like, some crazy stuff went down in Los Angeles. And so I look into it and I'm like, by the way, as people know, I would say I'm pretty neutral on this. I'm open to it. Bunch of Palestine, keffiyeh, masky.
Yeah, and I strive to rise above my own partisan preferences. All right, what's the bloody title of this stream? Right, decoding the winning strategy of the Palestinians. So the Palestinians don't only lose, right? They are not perpetual inherent losers, right? They've done a lot of losing, but they've also done a lot of winning. And I'm going to spend most of today's show, like I did yesterday on most of yesterday's show, decoding the winning part of the Palestinian strategy.
He's, beating people up. It's possible. I'm skeptical. So we look into it and we're like, oh, yeah, it doesn't seem good. Now, all these politicians start condemning the act. Everyone's like, oh my God, this is terrible. There was a pogrom.
Yeah, normally people are going to condemn access to churches, synagogues, and mosques. Right? You blockade and prevent people from entering a church, a synagogue, or a mosque. That's not going to win you good PR, even if it's a real estate event at that church or at that mosque. Right? They don't only use churches to worship God. They don't only use mosques to worship God. Right? I think any mosque or any religious institution that hosts planning of terrorist events, like many mosques in the United States, including the mosque in Culver City, right? It was a host to the planning of 9/11. I think any religious institution or any NGO that hosts the planning for a mass casualty terrorist event should be destroyed, just razed to rubble.
Happened in Los Angeles. Now I'm starting to get suspicious because anytime I start to see that language come out,
Like,
I'm like,
wait
okay.
a second.
So then, our producer is like, well, it was in response to a real estate event. And I said, what? What are you talking about? So then we start to look and we checked it. We had to check that flyer. We confirmed it. We go to the Los Angeles Times and we read, the local paper about what happened. And you have to read, I want to say 20 paragraphs down.
We have this article and put it up on the screen.
Yeah, we can put D3.
I have some sympathy for this critique. Right, I'm not all in, but it is an important critique. I think that this is a real estate event, and that's why you have protesters. To me, that's one of the top 3 points about this whole story. It should be mentioned in the first 3 paragraphs. To me, it's a very important point. So I welcome this critique. I think there is some substance here.
Please, guys, up on the screen, and it takes scrolling and scrolling and scrolling and scrolling to discover the context of the real estate event. And in my opinion, that kind of does change everything, though, because all the rhetoric that I see online is everyone's like, why are they protesting in a synagogue? This is disgusting.
No, it doesn't change everything, right? A synagogue and a church and a mosque are not only used for worshiping God, right? They are also used to enable God's people, right, to conduct themselves in this world, right? All religious people understand that they are also living in this world in addition to aiming for something higher and holier. So it doesn't change everything, but it wasn't a protest at Jews praying, right? It was a protest at a real estate event. So got a lot of sympathy here with the Breaking Points critique.
This is a religious temple. Like, how can they do this out of all the places to choose? I'm like, okay, well, if you're hosting a real estate event, auctioning off land in the West Bank, and it says
it wasn't primarily auctioning off land in the West Bank. It was in Israel. And if these 2 hosts of Breaking Points are outraged at selling land, all right, why is it only the Jewish state that they're outraged about? How many other shows have they done where they condemn or say, oh, it's totally cool to blockade attendance at a real estate event? Is it only when Jews sell land and when Jews buy land that they become outraged? Because I don't remember these guys getting outraged at other real estate events. So if it's only when Jews do X that you get upset, right, and when any other group engages in selling real estate, right, you couldn't care less, then, yeah, you've got a particular hang up with Jews.
Anglo neighborhoods early. That's a little bit crazy. Can we all agree?
Why is it crazy? Right? They're selling land. Why is it any more crazy than selling land in Beverlywood, in Beverly Hills, in Santa Monica, where you live? Right? People want to be able to speak to people who speak their language. Right? I suspect the hosts of this show do not live in predominantly black neighborhoods. Oh my God, they're such racists. Why do they choose to spend so much money to avoid living in a predominantly black neighborhood?
With that. All right. Now, I'm not saying anybody gets deserved violence. I don't think there should be any violence.
Yeah,
again,
agreed.
On the other side.
Agreed.
But, legitimate, I think, around for a protest. So, this is what I mean. Let's flip it around. So,
yes, I can completely understand why there would be a protest. Right? Let's say it's two tribes that have, absolutely no connection to me. I would understand if circumstances reverse, just two other tribes, right? Why there would be protests. But if the protesters are blockading the normal right of Americans to move freely, then I would support a very severe response. On the other hand, if they're just protesting, right? Nobody cares if they just protest. Right? Almost nobody cares in America about Palestine or about Israel. Americans overwhelmingly care about America, as they should. Americans don't care that much about other countries.
I'm Indian. Let's say that there is a Hindu temple, like the one I used to go to where I was growing up. And there was an event there where they were...
Well, you're Indian, you're Hindu. Okay, so India is steadily becoming more Hindu nationalist and sending out hit squads, right, around the world to kill opponents of Hindu nationalism. And as a Hindu and someone of Indian descent, all right, you're probably going to receive some blowback for that. Now, I would not want your Hindu temple blockaded, right, just because India sends out hit squads to kill its enemies.
We're auctioning off land in Kashmir. That'd be a little bit crazy.
Yeah.
And we said it was only for Hindus. And then a bunch of Pakistanis showed up, and then there was like a clash or whatever. And people said that they had unprovoked attacked a bunch of Hindus. Even me, I'd be like, come on, guys. Like this, look, they're within their rights, to show up. This is America. Last time I checked, none of that is in the public sphere.
Wait, they keep emphasizing these protesters are within their rights. They're not in their rights. They're acting illegally. This is not a publicly sanctioned protest, and they are blockading. That's the point. It's not protesting. So these two hosts are just as disingenuous as the media that doesn't emphasize that this is a real estate event.
The way people are talking about it, it's as if it was totally unprovoked. And I just think, look, again, I condemn violence. I don't think it should have happened. I think the police should have kept them separate, etc. That said, if you don't report that, you are just being blatantly dishonest.
Because
and that's the issue.
Here's the way. To be honest with you, the LA Times, the fact they even mentioned that there was a quote unquote real estate event with none of the like, oh, and by the way, they're selling, illegal stolen land, etc., and it's for Jews only. The fact they even mentioned that puts them better than like 95% of mainstream coverage, which all portrayed this as like, people just hate Jews, so they were protesting a synagogue, with none of the context.
Yeah, so I got a lot of sympathy for their overall criticism, and I think they're also equally worthy of critique. All right, interesting article in the Wall Street Journal, an op-ed. Mob targets synagogue as LAPD stands by. So this is another valid perspective, right? I think the sector we just heard was valid, but this one
Mob targets
also.
synagogue as LAPD stands by. Anti-Israel protesters obstructed, beat, and bear-sprayed Jews who were simply trying to enter. By Alexandra Orbich. June 26, 2024. 1:40 p.m. Eastern Time. A friend texted on Sunday afternoon, just checking in to make sure your family is okay after everything in LA today. I hadn't been online and had no clue what he was talking about. It could have been anything, an earthquake or a wildfire, but something told me it was anti-Semitism. Unfortunately, I was right. Protesters waving Palestinian flags and shouting anti-Israel slogans gathered outside a Das Torah synagogue in Los Angeles' Pico Robertson neighborhood on Sunday. They tried to block the entrance and were soon met by counter-protesters waving Israeli flags. The groups clashed. A Das Torah official said the anti-Israel demonstrators maced and bear-sprayed Jews trying to enter the synagogue, which was holding.
So I think it's generally a bad idea to unnecessarily physically brawl in these situations. But if the opposition has set up a blockade so that you can't do the things that you need to do and want to do, then you have created a situation where a brawl is very much in your group's best interest, because the police may never getting around to creating a space for you to go about your business.
An Israeli real estate fair. Talia Regev, 43, said she was sprayed and saw violent altercations between the two groups. There was nowhere to turn where you could be safe, said Naftali Sherman, 25, who had planned to attend the synagogue's fair. He was attacked and ended up in the hospital. There was a whole gang of protesters on top of me. They broke my nose and kicked me in the head a couple of times. Israeli-born journalist Daniel Greenfield reported that an anti-Israel protester had threatened, "Billions of us will come and kill you." President Biden and California Governor Gavin Newsom took to social media to condemn Sunday's act of hate. Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass promised that the police would provide additional patrols in the Pico Robertson community as well as outside of houses of worship throughout the city. It's good they spoke up, but tweeting isn't enough. Nor is standing by and watching. Members of the Los Angeles Police Department observed the melee unfold rather than protecting those targeted by the mob. It took volunteers from nonprofit Jewish security organizations, including LA Shmira Public Safety and Megan AM, to break up the scuffles. Without them, it would have been a lot worse, Mr. Sherman said. If not for Megan AM, I don't know what would have happened, said David Kramer, 37. People were running.
Okay, let's get Dooovid back onto the show. So, Dooovid, why don't you just pick one point? Right, I know we often begin with you talking about the different points that you can make, but let's change that dynamic. Let's just have you make one point. You made a bunch of points in the chat. Choose one, and please develop it.
Okay, so randomly last night, this Jewish streamer who also debates counter-Semites on the Alex Jones, so Adam King.
Yes, yes, I know him. Yeah.
Do you know him personally, IRL?
Yes. Not super well, but yeah, I know him in real life.
Okay, so he's kind of buddies with Adam Green, and we've talked a few times. So he sends me a DM, like he's doing a space, so join. And I hop on, and I picked up my parents from the airport in the middle, but he had some other people, so I wasn't the main guest at all, but I interacted a little bit. So I was listening to his take of that, and he claims that he claims, I mean, it sounds like it is the case that he's the head of a Jewish organization, possibly one of 3 different security organizations, and also that he went viral because he was standing behind the mayor at the big event, and there was the speakers roundtable, and he was part of it, and then all of a sudden, like, he got reposted. He's like me, kind of like small time, relatively, although he is actually on censored TV with Alex Jones. But he got picked up by this like liberal Antifa Twitter site that called him a neo-Nazi, and it got like reshared thousands of times and got hundreds of thousands of views. So he was doing this, kind of like ranting Twitter space where he's, he can't believe people are accusing him of being a neo-Nazi. But at the same time, he gave his like insider perspective of what happened and what should happen, and like the mayor. And I guess he proposed legislation. He got a law passed, and he's saying like, the one thing they should do is stop allowing masks at protest, which, maybe sounds reasonable. Is already a law. So I'm not sure if that's interesting. Or
yeah, it is interesting. What's his name? Adam King?
Adam King. King is his last name. I think he says he's like a 5th generation or Los Angeles Jew. He had lived in Israel, maybe like some sort of Baal Tshuva, and he was actually in like the Gush Etiv settlement in Gaza when it got raided and abandoned by Israel, and he was like protesting till the last moment, and the Israeli police had to drag him out of Gaza. But then he became like a Kabbalist, and like a Rebbe Nachman type Kabbalist, and somehow he got connected with Alex Jones, and he has like an hour on censored TV, which is Alex Jones News Network.
Oh, yeah, the Adam King show. Yeah, so he ran for Congress against Karen Bass a few years ago.
Okay, I mean, were you familiar or following it then? Was he in LA?
Well, I went to his opening speech, I remember, so.
Yeah, I I don't say anything negative, but he sounded a little bit delusional and like whiny from the perspective, like, he's buddies with Adam Green. And he was like, I can't believe they're calling me a Nazi. And I was just kind of saying, of course, it's like group conflict, and they're going to do anything to, it doesn't matter whether it makes sense that you're a Nazi or not, but that's just a strategy that you're using. And, but it was interesting conversation about the dynamics of Jewish leadership and like the ADL and the Federation and female rabbis. And, because I'm conspiratorially minded. So he started mentioning it and I immediately jumped on these conspiracy theories. And he's on Alex Jones. And we were having kind of good conversation until the end. I accused him of whining. And then he was like, I will drop you in a second. Um, but
Wait, what does the Jewish Federation and female rabbis have to do with this story?
he thinks, he has some knowledge that there's a lot of pressure in City Hall between Jewish organizations. And to some extent, like the ADL and the Federation and the liberal Jewish community is the mainstream voice of LA Jews. And they don't like Orthodox Jews, especially him, who has his own organization and trying to stand up for Jews themselves. And so it could have been underhanded tactics purposely to make the Orthodox Jewish community look bad. And he claimed it was police mishandling. And, that the police, if they just simply set up a barricade, the protest wouldn't have been an issue. And it could have been conspiracy where like the ADL or Federation or female rabbis purposely put a wrench in it in order to make the chaos happen so that they could step in and take control of the liaison community relationships of the Orthodox community, make them look incompetent, so that the mayor or various community leaders within the police and various things will be like, we can't work with those Orthodox leaders. You have to work with the ADL or Federation or female rabbis.
Now, you said something that I'm going to remark on. You mentioned, I love conspiracy theories. Talk to me more about that. Why you love conspiracy theories? I also, at times, love conspiracy theories, but I'd like to know more about it from your experience. What is it that you love about conspiracy theories?
Well, just a neutral view. The conspiracy just meaning people working behind the scenes to control power. Because I'm libertarian and distrust power in all cases. So any case where you have power exerted, I assume that there's factions behind the scene that are acting in their own interest to fight other factions for power. So in that sense, that that guy's actually on the, Adam King's actually on Alex Jones, but yeah, I just mean like, of course, the ADL is conspiring to push the Orthodox Jews away from power, and then to immediately come up with a scenario for how that might have played out.
Okay, so here I'm going to be brutally honest about why I have so often been attracted to conspiracy theories, because it enabled me to feel special. It enabled me to feel like I knew what was really going on, that I could see through the BS. And yeah, my life was losing in most conventional ways, and all the people around me were vastly excelling me, but at least I could see through the BS. I had the bravery and the insight to recognize how the world really worked. So for me, throughout my life, at various times, believing in conspiracy theories has been a way to try to prop up my self-esteem and try to give myself some solace that, yeah, even though I was losing in reality, at least in this realm of conspiracy theories, I was smarter than everyone else. So that was the emotional payoff for me. That was the key source of attraction of conspiracy theories for me. It was a way for me to justify my losing at life. It's because there are conspiracies out there that hold down good people like me. And yeah, even though I'm losing, at least I see through the BS, and therefore I am more meritorious and smarter than all the people who are conventionally more successful than me. Do you relate to any of that, or is what I said just a complete foreign language to you?
Well, it's possible, and I could say that in the black box of my mind, or even the humbling reality of who I am, that's possible. But I don't think that's the majoritarian reason for myself. I would say I was a junior chess champion and grew up in the the shadows of Bobby Fischer, who was the most famous chess player. And there's a certain type thinking of chess where you have multiple possibilities. Like, it's not just the one move you could have made. There's this whole host of other possibilities. And so I just say naturally my mind works in the way where and thinking like, well, yeah, there's a whole bunch of different possibilities that aren't being analyzed. Let's analyze those possibilities. And maybe also because, not just me trying to think I was smart, often I was recognized as intelligent. I was recognized as a child prodigy. I went to a special school for people of high IQs, even in the Orthodox community or various workstations, or till today. People will ask me to analyze these situations, due to maybe my special ability, not necessarily like unique ability, but to just pump out uh, instantaneously possibilities and analyze them. Whether it makes me feel I'm special or powerful, because I'm not sure, because like I'm not sure I have any power from doing it, and it's just like I have a distrust of power. I generally think whatever I'm being told as the mainstream narrative is usually false, and I'm being told it for a nefarious reason, usually cover up for the people in power. And I'm not sure that.
Have you ever experienced the thrill of believing that you're special and that your suffering is explained by some nefarious conspiracy? Have you ever even just felt that emotional rush?
No, because I think, I mean, maybe, but I mean, in high school, I read the Alice Miller's The Drama of the Gifted Child.
Yes.
I'm not sure. Are you familiar with
Yes,
that
I
book?
have. I've read it. Yes.
When did you read it?
I read it around 1998. My therapist recommended it.
Okay, but I read that book when I was like 14. And so, like, saying, is it possible if you had read that book when you were 14 that it would have made change your outlook, where you're saying like, you're like, okay, I'm smarter than people, but it causes me certain problems or disadvantages, and these may be narcissistic delusions that you had. Had you read Alice Miller's Drama of a Gifted Child, would have earlier in your life might have changed that?
It might have been another thing that strengthened my narcissism. So for people who haven't read the book or even heard of it, its essential thesis is that we're special. It's like you're a gifted wizard, like the Harry Potter books, and so that's why life is so painful for you, because you're so special, and our cruel society and unfeeling people above you in social status and power have inflicted all sorts of wounds on you due to how special and gifted you are.
Well, I mean, I might put it more in the terms like, um, children who have higher intellectual abilities perceive things that other people can't, including possibly motivations and feelings of other people, and that could lead to severe depression and mania, kind of like the Bobby Fischer syndrome. But saying that, okay, because I have a higher IQ, or maybe you have a higher IQ, um, you could see beneath the surface of what other people do. It doesn't mean you necessarily could figure things out, but that leads to psychological difficulties. And so I'm not sure. I mean, Alice Miller's kind of like a mainstream theory, just like psychology, like saying like being gifted isn't all roses and benefits. There's a downside to it too, namely leading to things like depression, narcissism, mania, or various things, and that it could be directly linked to the higher intelligence that causes these things.
Yeah, I mean, there was a time and a place where her book was very de rigueur. It was everyone was reading it. I don't think it has sustained people's respect, but it certainly had significant appeal. What do you think
Or
about?
just on the conspiracy theory, just say like you're putting it like a emotional need as opposed to an intelligence thing. So we say, is it just a product of the more intelligent mind to produce conspiracy theories that's not necessarily connected to emotional need, but just because the mind processes things, quicker, speeder, deeper. That a smarter person just naturally produces conspiracy theories, whether they like it or not.
Yeah, I don't think that was really came up in the book. She talked about the pain that smarter, gifted kids have, but
Yeah, she doesn't mention that. I'm saying that,
right.
like, because you were connecting the conspiracy theory to like emotional need, but like, I mean, say, okay, like dumb people could believe in conspiracy theories or maybe come up with one, but like I could generate instantaneously multiple conspiracy theories,
Yeah,
and
so smart
I can't even
people.
stop my mind from doing it, whether I want to or not. I can't even stop my mind from doing it.
Yeah, But I think what's underneath that is that we all spontaneously generate theories about why we're so awesome. And so it may take many different forms, but what's really going on is we're always trying to look for a frame through which we're awesome. So a gifted child is, let me finish my point. A gifted child is definitely going to have pain that a less gifted child will not have. But on the other hand, a gifted child will also have adaptive mechanisms that the less gifted won't have. Back to you, Dooovid.
Yeah, I just don't see how generating conspiracy theories makes me feel awesome. I mean, you could say like sometimes it's like, aha, like I'm so smart, I figured things out. But like sometimes it's like, like shut this dumb voice in my head, I can't shut it off. So I don't necessarily know like why you think it's like an egotistic thing to come up with conspiracy things. It's just the desire to understand the world, and you use your abilities to try to understand the world. And if you have more abilities to, like Isaac Newton, the definition of intelligence is to hold multiple conflicting ideas in your head at the same time, which is extremely difficult. People like the multiple truth hypothesis. So the average person just understand the mainstream narrative is difficult, let alone to be able to spontaneously generate unique possibilities opposed to the mainstream narrative to explain the circumstance.
Okay, because you're using conspiracy theory in its denotative sense, but that's not what it means effectively, connotatively. You're saying conspiracy theory just means when more than one party, all right, when two or more parties get together and plan something. That's not what is meant by conspiracy theory. What's meant by conspiracy theory is that more than two parties have gotten together and planned something, and all the conventional sources of knowledge deny that it's true. So that's the connotative meaning of conspiracy theories. So when you're coming up with conspiracy theories, you're coming up with theories that all normal and elite sources of knowledge say are nonsense. That's what is meant by conspiracy theory. It's not the literal meaning, the denotative meaning of just 9/11. All right, was carried out by Al Qaeda. All right, it was a conspiracy, and they did this thing that killed thousands of Americans. Right, it's not a conspiracy theory in the way the phrase is used to say that you believe that Al Qaeda carried out 9/11. That's just accepted knowledge. Now, to say that the United States government carried out 9/11 as an inside job, that is how conspiracy theory is used, right? It's not used to literally mean a conspiracy. It's a conspiracy theory that is denied by all conventional and all elite forms of knowledge. And so understanding multiple perspectives and coming out with multiple theories about how something might happen is not what is meant by conspiracy theory, unless those perspectives are ones that have been debunked by both elite and conventional sources of wisdom. So if you're coming up with theories that we never landed on the moon, if you're coming up with theories that 9/11 was an inside job, then you're truly engaged in conspiracy theories. If you're just coming up with literal denotative conspiracy theories that have not been debunked by conventional and elite sources of knowledge, you're not engaged in conspiracy theorizing as is understood by the term. So there's all the difference in the world between the literal meaning of two words and how the two words are used.
Yeah, I won't disagree in saying like I'm actually planning to do a deep dive on conspiracy theories. I've started to research it, and there's like the history and the neutral cognitive science view on conspiracy theories versus like this dangerous pejorative thing, like possibly like the CIA with John F. Kennedy making the term in that way, is where I use like a neutral type thing where like, Luke, I think you and Halsey and Frame Games were in on it together the whole time. And I have some concocted of idea like you didn't tell me, but really you and Halsey and Frame Games were having secret meetings plotting against me. And it's saying, well, is that a conspiracy theory? Like if the popular definition is like, no, that's just like paranoia. And to say like, okay, like I have a paranoia personality, so my mind can't help but to produce thoughts like that. Like maybe Luke and Halsey are conspiring against me, and like or type things, which you say, okay, that's just paranoia. That's not conspiracy theory. But we could put a bookmark in this, and it'd be interesting to talk about in the future, especially because I'm reading multiple books on it. But
I got the point, and I had a quick thought on it. What you're engaged in is what many gurus do. So you're going to be a live streamer, right? If you're going to be any kind of online personality, you have to come up with content that people won't get from other sources. And so one of the most predictable paths that gurus like Jordan Peterson or Brett Weinstein take is to take a phrase which conventionally has one meaning and then instead understand the phrase differently and say, oh, this thing that everyone thinks is bad, conspiracy theories, is actually good, right? So then you're going against the grain, you're attracting attention for saying something that's contrarian. You're not going to find many people arguing for a balanced approach to conspiracy theories in the mainstream media, because the way the phrase is used is that this is, a stupid thing that sick people need to shore up their self-esteem. So this is a very common trick among people trying to develop an online personality, is to take a phrase or a topic that is conventionally understood one way and instead talk about it in a way that's different from the conventional way. And that way you will sound as though you're giving something special to your audience. You're saying, hey, this thing that everyone thinks is bad, it may not actually be bad. And so that's a very common path for people developing an online presence.
Yeah, I mean, just the final thing to say on that, because it's also the pure use of the word and saying, okay, I suffer some paranoia and I was a drug addict for periods of my life. Maybe you don't suffer paranoia, but it's saying paranoia implying I constantly think people are conspiring against me, but you wouldn't necessarily call that a conspiracy theory, that I have paranoia and I'm constantly thinking about how maybe people are conspiring against me, that I might call those conspiracy theories.
Yeah, maybe I need to think more deeply about that. But I have suffered from paranoia because whenever you're isolated and lonely, all these things come up. So I don't know. Did you hear Elliot Blatt's story last night on
No,
the
I
show?
I was picking my parents up from the
Okay.
airport, so
Okay.
right after I left, I tuned out.
Okay. So Elliot Blatt gave a story where a very dodgy character who would normally be associating with drug addicts suddenly brings over to Elliot's place a woman who's gorgeous and speaks multiple languages, and I was and suddenly like Elliot can't help but fall for this woman, even though he understands that he met her through the presence of a very dodgy character, and this woman's probably trying to develop and run a scam on him, but she's so beautiful that he can't help but kind of start falling for her whenever he's in her presence. He's absolutely intoxicated. And so my point to him was that your intoxication and vulnerability is something that you actually carry around all the time, because at core, you have a deep loneliness. And so when a beautiful woman or something comes along that offers you a sense of feeling connected to life like a normal person, it's going to become absolutely intoxicating because you're so hungry. You're so thirsty for connection. And this thirst and this vulnerability is actually with you all the time. It's only become blindingly clear with regard to this con that's being run on you right now. So if you're lonely, you're going to have to adapt to that very desperate state, because loneliness is a warning sign that nature is giving us that something seriously wrong with your life, and it's impossible to just live with loneliness day in and day out, not do anything about it. So one way you can do something about it is to start over crediting other people. So a woman who smiles at you at the checkout line, the cashier, right? You start developing fantasies that she's really interested in you, or you start developing conspiracy theories about how what everyone's telling you about XYZ is not true, or you start getting paranoid, thinking that everyone who looks at you a certain way or speaks to you a certain way, that they are engaged in some nefarious plot to strangle you, or you're going to check out through using marijuana or through using pornography or through drinking or video games. But the state of being lonely is absolutely unbearable. And so we will try to stamp it down inside of us by getting paranoid, by getting depressed, by getting angry, by conspiracy theorizing, by obsessing over women who are not available to us. So loneliness makes us very vulnerable to everything that we've just discussed. Any thoughts?
Yeah, and just hearing you say that, like, yes, you're probably right that I am lonely and I do want to feel special, and I do purposely, like Jordan Peterson, use words in my own unique way that goes against the common thread. And in my own mind, I'm thinking like I'm right, everybody else is wrong. And so I'd say like, well, what Elliot thinking like, like I would say, well, that's a conspiracy theory. And be like, no, it's not. That's not what a conspiracy. Like, yeah, it's just everyone else is wrong, and for some nefarious reason, uses conspiracy theory inaccurately. But Elliot, you're actually right to think of a conspiracy theory between this woman conspiring with another person to take advantage of you, and my self-esteem is built upon a handful of people, like Church of Entropy, a few streamers that agree with me and will use a common lexicon. And even in all of my kind of like entourages or little groups or people I work with, we always had a common lexicon of code words that basically nobody else used, and it showed membership in our little clique. And I mean, we've talked about these things in the past, so I would accept your psychoanalysis as true to some extent, but I still think I'm right and everyone else is wrong, and that conspiracy theory means what I think it does, and and it's a conspiracy theory that so on and so on, that the mainstream has given a nefarious attachment to it.
Right. What do you think about the idea if you fire up a live stream and you simply say what is the standard conventional knowledge on a topic, that there's really no point for doing a live stream?
Yeah, I mean, because okay, I'm following big the Samantha Wool case, and I'm a conspiracy theorist. I don't
Mm-hmm.
think the guy on trial did it.
Yeah.
And
Because
so,
there's no purpose in doing a live stream if you're just going to repeat the conventional wisdom, right?
Yeah,
You have to, you're almost driven to conspiracy theories if you live stream, because there's no point in my doing a live stream if I only report what the Detroit News says about the Samantha Wool trial. Then there's absolutely no point for that live stream.
though this might be a case where the conspiracy is going to be proven correct, but it's saying, so I was saying that almost everybody that's doing independent journalism on the Samantha Wool case thinks that the defendant is not guilty. Um, but like you're saying, but well, it's because they're independent journalists, and there wouldn't be any purpose to their reporting if they were just saying the mainstream uh, narrative. Although like a lot of people say, well, sometimes conspiracy theories turn out to be correct, and even mainstream news sources now are saying that the case is bizarre, and they wouldn't be surprised if it's a hung jury.
Right. But do you see the serious dangers in what we're doing? I mean, we've talked a great deal about the perils of the e-personality, but here's an additional peril, right? There's no point in my doing a live stream if all I'm going to do is repeat the conventional sources of knowledge. I have to believe that I have something special to impart. And so contrarian perspectives, all right, are highly appealing for people doing what we're doing. All right. All the incentives that we face go in a contrarian direction, because if we are the opposite of contrarian, there would be no point to doing a live stream.
I'm not sure about that, because we're alternative dissonant, and I think that there are a lot of mainstream people that do just repeat mainstream talking points, and they figure like, okay, like Kevin Michael Gray said, like people want interactive news, they want someone that they can interact with. So even if you're saying the exact same thing that everyone else is saying, that you provide a platform where the people listening could actually interact with you. And I would have to see numbers and statistics, because I would guess that maybe even the majority of people streaming do in fact just say the mainstream talking points.
Yeah, but the successful ones don't. Right? The successful, like for Destiny, for example, one thing that makes him successful is that he says, very naughty words that people in regular news or talk radio can't use. So he'll say things very graphic. He will sleep with people who watch his show and then talk about these very intimate details. So everyone has to have some sort of hook. The successful ones, all the successful ones have some sort of hook so that people go to them, rather than the professional broadcasters on TV or on radio. And so to whatever extent we build an audience, it's because we've got a hook. So for example, you and I, we're dissident thinkers who are interested in, some some naughty dissident perspectives, and that makes us different from the conventional TV broadcasters.
Yeah, although I mean, I think Destiny's. I mean, to your point that you just made is true, but like to the conspiracy, well, he says mainstream ideas, supports Biden, supports almost all the mainstream narratives with minor exceptions, like he supported Kyle Rittenhouse or Second Amendment, but generally he's mainstream narrative, but he has a hook, as
Yeah, he's
opposed
got
to
a
like
hook,
you
right?
were
He
saying
says
earlier
things
that you have to say
in a
something different
yeah,
than the mainstream
yeah.
narrative. He's just saying the mainstream narrative with a hook.
So to the extent that it's true, you've got to have a hook, right? You've got to have something special, and the dangers are that the incentives run so strongly in the direction of being a contrarian. How does one deal with that?
Well, I mean, I think also you could just have a niche audience with your areas of expertise. So like Luke Ford, Seventh Day Adventist, convert to Orthodox Judaism, little knowledge of economics, specialty in pornography business, examined white nationalist, various things that you have a unique perspective of expertise that ciphers information in a certain way that you could build up a little audience that likes hearing the commentary from you, and it's not necessarily based on something pejorative like a conspiracy or a hook, but just your unique your personality and experiences and expertises that ciphers information in a certain way that you build up an audience that you can interact with that like that. And maybe I could argue I have the same thing, like unique things about me that doesn't necessitate anything pejorative. Just people like getting their information from me because of my unique flavor of different experiences and expertise.
Yeah, we both do what one genre would describe as celebrity shows, right? So the normal path to success in podcasting is to narrowcast, right? Develop a unique topic and approach and just stick to it day in and day out so that people know what they're going to get when they come to your show, right? That's the normal conventional path to success. Both of us are too eclectic thinkers to be happy with that conventional path to podcasting success. So instead, we have to really use what's known as the celebrity approach, and that is whatever the person is talking about is going to have some appeal because there's just a sense of charisma about the individual. So whether I'm talking about the Dallas Cowboys or national politics or psychology or Orthodox Judaism, my hook is my personality and my life experience. Essentially, I and you, we're both podcasting, we're both live streaming as micro celebrities, as opposed to the conventional path to success, which would be to choose, one very, very narrow niche and dig into it on a regular basis. Any thoughts?
Yeah, and celebrity waxes and wanes, and
Yeah.
you could fall in and out of favor, and you could, in good times you could just be yourself and things work out, and in bad times you're saying you have to reinvent yourself or maybe you have to do hooks or nefarious things to get yourself back. And hashgacha pratis, divine providence, uh, random things out of our control to what are the current events that people care about. And if current events that people care about favor our personalities, we will wax and wane with the popularity. So if something comes up, like the Hans Niemann cheating scandal, and then it's like, okay, like I definitely want to hear what Doovid's talk saying on this, or something that maybe turns up with the pornography business or something. Someone's like, I haven't turned into Luke Ford for a few years, but like I wonder if he's talking about this, and like largely that's out of our control. In that what will cause us to be more appealing to a larger audience or less appealing.
So let me see if I can get your specific direct reaction to something that I failed to get a direct reaction on yesterday. When I see someone senselessly brawling, right, without purpose, right, senselessly brawling, I think someone who's an adult, right, so not just someone in the grip of their teenage hormones, but a 25-year-old man senselessly brawling, I think that person must have a pretty sad life and don't have much of a sense of risking anything. That if they if they had anything going for them, they wouldn't be needlessly placing themselves at risk. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, generally, like I 100% agree. And it was only like, the definitional regress because I didn't think that, I mean, it could be interpreted that what happened at the LA synagogue protest was senseless. But like as a rule, I've said my whole life, like, avoid people who do stupid things for no reason. And I did party promotion and event promotion and like people who get in fights like physically fights for no reason versus like okay like so we're just playing around with what senseless means. But I mean saying if your friends are going to a party, and I'm not actually sure, I think it's a personality trait that some people are very conflict prone and are constantly getting in fights. And so, like, if you go out with them to a bar or party or even to a synagogue event, they're extremely more likely to get into confrontations and even violence, and it might affect their life. Although some people are, bullies and do that their whole life and relatively have successful lives. So I'm not sure if you agree with that context.
Sure, I'm fine with that. But let me further develop on this. I've absolutely enjoyed a 7-part Netflix documentary series on the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders, and here's what struck me, and it's got a great deal in common with the Senseless brawlers, is that many of the girls struck me as not growing up feeling pretty, and so by becoming a Dallas Cowboy cheerleader, or for other girls becoming a porn star, enabled them to feel special, enabled them to feel pretty, and it seems with many of them, both in the porn industry and as cheerleaders, that they're desperately trying to fill a hole in their soul. So I'm thinking about one professional NFL cheerleader who converted to Orthodox Judaism, but both the conversion to Orthodox Judaism and the professional cheerleading came from the same place. They were just different expressions of this need to feel whole. And so as professional Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders, I mean, they were putting their bodies through great stress. I mean, they needed hip surgeries and all sorts of surgeries. They were getting paid almost nothing. The job commanded enormous amount of their time. It required enormous amount of discipline. It foreclosed all sorts of other options for their lives. And I would have to think, if what I've just set up for you is accurate, Dooovid, that's similarly coming from a place like the Brawlers, people with not a lot to lose, that they would go to such desperate attempts to feel whole. Any thoughts?
Yeah, Mike, I like to analyze violence, and I think people underrate what a good strategy violence is. And like if we're cerebral people and favor long-term planning or the consequences of your action, but like in short-term strategy, um, violence is often the best strategy. And certainly like various things, like a lot of times, people like the red pill now has, basically been exclusively used for dating relations. That I think the strongest relation between promiscuous sexual activity is actually with violence. And, God forbid that um, violent men tend to possibly get the most sexual relations, especially with promiscuous women. And a lot of times, promiscuous women, um, even just the animalistic way, what promiscuous women do when they have sexual relations with people is they want the man that they're going to have sexual relations with to beat up their former boyfriend. And so, just like in that term, like violence is important, and that's why people risk it for a strategy. And even looking like the protesters on the Jewish side or the Palestinian side, you could like they're both basically just trying to impress women.
Yeah. So what do you think of the motivations for a woman becoming a porn star or a cheerleader?
I don't have expertise in that, but I think
I know,
that
but what do you guess? Like often there's great wisdom from people who know nothing about a topic. What do you guess is driving someone to do that?
well, we discussed it once with the Talmud, where it's actually smarter women that are smarter than their peers, especially their male peers, that end up promiscuous. And so it's an attitude or of it's kind of like the divine payback of trying to take advantage of people. So and I think I've seen studies on it besides the statement in the Talmud that like girls who are too smart end up prostitutes.
Hmm. Okay, Dooovid, I'm going to wrap up this segment. Any final words?
What did you even want to talk like Adam King and the possibility of the Federation or secular people conspiring against the Orthodox community to usurp leadership by purposely making them look bad?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely ludicrous. There's absolutely no evidence for it. I think it's complete nonsense. But if you want to develop that case, I mean, go ahead.
Well, because I didn't know too much about it. Just talking with Adam King, and like as I mentioned, that's how we got into the rabbit hole of conspiracy theory because he's on Alex Jones. But I was saying that um, there's a fight in City Hall and with the communities of powers of who represents the Jews, and I assume in LA, so I was learning most of this from Adam King because I'm not familiar with like city council or the power players. That there's probably a struggle between the Orthodox, community leaders in the Federation and the ADL, and certainly what happened the other day is an opportunity for critics of the Orthodox community, um, specifically in the liberal Jewish community, not mentioning, not even to mention like anti-Semites or critics of the Jewish community in general, but specifically from the liberal Jewish community to try to say the Orthodox community is incompetent and therefore they shouldn't you shouldn't take their community leaders seriously, and you should let the ADL or Federation speak for them.
Yeah, I don't think there's much evidence of a conspiracy here. I mean, everyone's scrambling for power, and I'll say this socially: of all the groups I've known,
Forget I use the word conspiracy.
right? Yeah, I think everyone's always struggling for power in Jewish life and in non-Jewish life. But out of all the groups I've known, Jews are the least likely to follow. Right? Jews are the toughest crowd. If you're a public speaker, a lot of Jews want to be leaders. Not many Jews want to be followers.
What have you ever been? Because like, okay, Adam King happened to be at like the council of community leaders that was with that Mayor Bass called after this event that included the Simon Wiesenthal Center. That I guess there was even a mention that like only Rabbi Cooper came instead of Rabbi Heyer, and Adam King had his organization, and there was also your Malsky or something like if it's a Jewish city
Zev
councilwoman.
Yaroslavsky.
Yaroslavsky, she was the one she was the one King was mentioning often, that after the event, um, where he came as a community leader, that the mayor and this woman were distancing himself because people were claiming that he's a neo-Nazi, like he's coming as a legitimate representative of an Orthodox Jewish faction, but once his picture was plastered all over the paper standing behind the mayor, that people are like, that dude's a neo-Nazi, that dude talked with Alex Jones and Nicholas Fuentes and all these people, and now the mayor or this woman and other forces are distancing themselves from him.
Yeah, well, a normal person would want to distance themselves from anyone associated with Alex Jones. So it makes sense that the mayor would want to distance herself from King. It's nothing I see as nefarious. It's just common sense.
Well, and that's what I told him at the end. And I kind of said, because he like went on like a rant for like 20 minutes. I was like, dude, you're just whining. And then like it said that he was like, I will drop you in a second. And I was like, well, do what you got to do. But then he let me make my point where I was kind of neutral about group conflict. And like, I was kind of like, why are you surprised? Of course they're going to do that. But he didn't feel that way, that he was deeply hurt. And he's like, how can you possibly think I'm a neo-Nazi? I'm the superest Jew of all Jews.
Right. I mean, who has the time to do all the live streaming that Mr. King, myself and you do? All right, people who aren't married with kids. What kind of people aren't married with kids? People who are generally on the margins. And so people who are on the margins tend to hang out with other people on the margins. And people who are not on the margins generally don't want to be associated with people on the margins.
I think he is actually married. I'm not sure if he has kids, but
okay.
But I mean, even that case, like, is saying like, well, yeah, that's a deep hit to the egos because, like, okay, like I've been a distance, so even as a kid, like I kind of put myself, even as a teenager, that I was going to be a person on the margins and never really had hopes of being mainstream, and designed my personality and positive feedback mechanisms as being someone on the margin. And maybe you also did that, although it didn't appear that King had that, like he thought he was mainstream, even though the evidence might be against that. And I'm not sure uh the alt-right or the people you follow, or even pornography or various things, like what people at a young age determined that they were going to be an outsider, or what people kind of take delusions despite everything that they're doing to think that they're basically normal.
Well, people who are in the center of life, who are popular and effective and loved and have popular successful friends, such people never choose to marginalize themselves. But if you're already on the margins, then you'll be incentivized to make the best of it. So what we've all done here is we've made the best of our marginalized status.
And just, you could close the chapter on this, just because I reminded myself right offhand why intelligent women become promiscuous, or maybe go into porn. And it probably starts with being smart enough to trick other people. So if you're a normal pretty girl in high school that's above average attractiveness and intelligence, and you think like, I could cheat on my boyfriend and get away with it, because they realize that they're a little bit smarter than people, and eventually that comes back to bite them, and everybody figures it out, and then they get labeled as a slut, and either they have to repent, or they embrace it. But it's that element of high intelligence that causes and not necessarily like like that all porn people are geniuses. They even like people in low intelligence areas, but they're smarter than their peers. So even if you're an African American woman growing up in the hood, that the average slut is actually smarter than her peers, and that's what causes the descent into prostitution or promiscuity many times.
Yeah, I think the opposite is true. I think the promiscuous woman is generally less intelligent than her peers. But anyway, Dooovid, I'm going to move on. So thanks for coming by.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, take care. So you remember COVID vaccine mandates? I didn't like that topic back in the day. So I had one or two inclinations thinking, oh, government-directed vaccine mandates, I can kind of see the point for them. But I pretty quickly took the position that I don't favor government-directed COVID vaccine mandates, that I wanted people to have the freedom to choose. And then I read an essay in the New York Review of Books by Linda Greenhouse. So just fired up my New York Review of Books subscription a few weeks ago. And in the December 21, 2023 issue, An Unhealthy Definition of Rights, the new majority on the Supreme Court, religious liberty takes precedence over the government's power to protect public health. And so I started thinking more deeply about the topic, and now I love the topic, because how much freedom would I be willing to give up, all right, to create a safer public space, right? If more people are vaccinated, fewer people will get severely sick or die from COVID. We will have a safer, healthier society with reduced health expenses and less needless loss of life. So there is some degree of human freedom that I would give up for those benefits. So generally speaking, in the competition between individual freedom and the public good, right? I'm fairly centrist, but when I was younger, I definitely had much stronger libertarian inclinations. And then reporting on the porn industry made me think we need more regulations for the public good, that the libertarian approach is not a good approach for society in many things, right? Some libertarianism in society is good, so you can make the arguments for this or that. Let's decrease regulation. I'm quite open to it. But as I get older, I am tending more towards the side of the public good. And so if you got a fighting force, all right, why would you not want that fighting force to be at peak efficiency and at peak health, and to do everything you can to reduce the chances of the fighting force becoming ill, let alone seriously ill? So I can now better understand the case for mandated COVID vaccinations. So if vaccinations have been proven safe and effective, I don't love the idea of government-directed vaccinations, but I certainly align with creating incentives for people to get vaccinated. And one of the most powerful incentives to get people vaccinated is to make it more difficult for them to participate in public life if they're not vaccinated. So I remember when I went to Australia, the first time I went to synagogue, I didn't bring proof of vaccination with me, so I did not get into the particular synagogue. So this was still in the height of COVID. This was November of 2021, I believe. The vaccine had recently been released in the United States, but most people weren't being vaccinated. So I certainly believe in a public policy that strongly incentivizes getting vaccines that have been proven safe and effective. And I am open to government mandated vaccination in some areas, such as the military. I'm more open to it now than I was yesterday prior to reading this article. Okay, so Steve Saylor is on Oren McIntyre. I'm not a fan of Oren McIntyre. He strikes me as a hyperbolic attention seeker. So I generally agree with him. Like I generally agree with Tucker Carlson. I generally agree with Douglas Murray. But certainly with all of them, there's a lot of hyperbolic attention seeking, telling people what they want to hear. And so I get the sense with Oren McIntyre, the little I paid attention to him, that he's very much producing a performative online output to meet the desires of a particular audience. So he's not someone I respect, but I recognize he's very smart, and I'm certainly a fan of Steve Saylor.
With social media companies to censor people like myself and others who speak on political topics. So if you want to go ahead and support me and everybody else who broadcasts over
a reasonable guy who knows a lot of basic facts about this America, what the social science says, who observes a lot about daily life from a pretty normal point of view, and then I put it together in kind of a big picture that tends to scare people, I guess. That it's like, well, what if Saylor is right? Then that would be horrible. Especially that would mean, well, I've been wrong, and therefore maybe he should have my job. No, that's the worst possible conclusion they can come to. I don't know. So it's been going on forever, and I just keep doing what I do. And at the moment, I'm sort of more popular than ever, but I've been doing this a long time.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of the hug box where you talk to people that you just agree with and you tell a particular audience what it wants to hear. I'm a big Steve Saylor fan, not an Oren McIntyre fan.
And I have a lot of ups and downs over the decades.
Yeah, that kind of multi-decade overnight success there for you all of a sudden.
Yeah, I started writing for National Review in 1994. I've been a full-time opinion journalist since 2000. So,
okay, Glib Medley says something provocative here in the chat. 40, now older, perhaps weaker, so coercing the younger and the healthier is okay. Well, if you want to live in a society, you're down with coercion, right? If society gets anything done through coercion, you put people away if they're committing crimes. You make it difficult for them to avoid paying taxes. You require them to fulfill certain requirements if they want to own a gun or if they get a driver's license. So all societies, all communities rely on coercion. So it's not like, oh, this is something brand new and unique that 40 is advocating, something that is unheard of in human history. It must have something to do with 40's own physical health weakness. Look, how many lives are you willing to sacrifice to be against government-directed vaccine mandates in all cases, right? How many years of life are you willing to sacrifice? So are you willing to have 5,000 extra American deaths each year at an average loss of life of 10 years, right? So that's your side, right? You're willing to put up with thousands of additional unnecessary deaths costing on average 10 years. And I am open the idea of a little more government coercion in the area of public health, in particular with regard to vaccines, because for me, I see the argument that preservation of life of my fellow citizens, reducing sickness in the public square, creating a safer and healthier and stronger society is more important than allowing people the freedom to choose badly. For example, we mandate the use of seatbelts. In some circumstance, wearing a seatbelt will cost you your life as opposed to not wearing a seatbelt. But overwhelmingly, seatbelts save lives. Overwhelmingly, vaccines save lives. So I assume, Glib, that you're not a fan of vaccine mandates. So you're willing to sacrifice thousands of lives to preserve the freedom to choose badly. And I am less inclined in that direction than I was yesterday. Gerontocracy drools. Well, Glib, Medley, 2,000 people under 18 lost their life during COVID. Is that... we have various government academic surveys that show the average lives lost per COVID death was placed around 15 years. So at what point do people lose any value? So you have contempt for the old people, right? Gerontocracy drools. I get it. You loathe old people. You don't think they have any value. You couldn't give a F if hundreds of thousands of them die unnecessarily. I get it, right? You don't care. At what age do people cease to have value to you, right? For me, 80-year-olds still have value. 75-year-olds still have value. You have contempt for the old. At what age does that contempt kick in? Is it, say, 5 years above whatever age you are? And will you be down when you're 70 with other people having that same contempt for you that you have for 70-year-olds right now? Right? So just don't have to do a lot of reading between the lines. You have contempt for old people. You don't think they have any value. So when you get older, you're going to be cool with that, other people recognizing you as having no value. What standard does a vaccine need to meet before it's eligible to be mandated? Does this COVID vaccine meet that standard? So I don't know enough on that topic. I recognize that the consensus of the experts was that vaccines available in the United States of America were both safe and effective. Not effective as in perfectly effective, but they reduce your chances of dying and they reduce your chances of getting seriously ill. And the advantages of taking the COVID vaccine, as I understand it from the experts, vastly outweigh the disadvantages, just as the advantages of wearing a seatbelt vastly outweigh the disadvantages. Oh, whoa, Glib Medley. My God. Glib says you win, bro. Logic and reason really coming through. I'm embarrassed. I mean, if I can win with Glib Medley, then I can win with America, because Glib Medley is the champion of the chat. I mean, Elliot Blatt, I love you. You're a wonderful guest, but different people have different gifts. And Glib Medley has a particular gift for the apicore. No, I haven't been boosted in almost... I haven't been boosted. I haven't had a COVID vaccine. So it's now June, so 9 months. Apicore. I'm not even sure how to pronounce this, but this is Glib Medley's particular gift. He may have many other gifts. He may be a sensitive and generous lover, for all I know. But an apicore is a comment, a brief reference that makes an illuminating or entertaining point. Glib Medley, better than 999 people out of 10,000, right? Different people have different gifts. This is Glib's gift, right? He's better than 99.999% of people at making a brief, illuminating, or entertaining point. So it's a great honor, Glib, that you come to the show and you give us these blinding insights and often provocations. Because if I'm just standing here talking to a wall, I can't do the show. I have to be provoked. I have to be stirred up. I have to be needled. I have to have someone let me know that I'm mispronouncing something, that I've gone boring. So how the hell do you spell do you pronounce apicore? So let's see if there is a pronunciation here on YouTube, and then I will show you the word. Come on, bloody hell. Okay. I can't even see. Give me a link, right? If you know a link that shows how to pronounce it. I can't even properly read it. Here's the word APERCU. Aperçu. Comment or brief reference that makes an entertaining point. I can't even find an example of how you pronounce it. Okay, here we go. Must be a foreign word. It's not fair dinkum Anglo word. Bloody hell. Just give me aperçu. Aperçu. Sounds French.
Aperçu.
Thank you. Aperçu. Ah, it's a French word. Yeah, I was right. It's a French word. Oh man, what's going on with Israel?
Israel releasing this.
This is the #1 news story that I've been following.
Video right here that it says shows Hamas terrorists firing a projectile at a UNICEF aid convoy. That convoy heading to reunite children in northern Gaza with their families in the south. Now, the Israel Defense Force is saying it's more evidence that Hamas is jeopardizing the safety of Gazan civilians. Now, over in the north, Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon appear to be on the brink of a possible war, with attacks by the terror group only intensifying. Do want to talk more about all of the latest developments here, so let's bring in John.
Okay, let's go big-brained back to Amanda Alexander, her essay on how the Palestinians successively copied the North Vietnam, the Viet Cong narrative, and why that proved to be such a winner. So the theory of the People's War. Remember, People's War is the communist theory of war, that anything is kosher to overthrow colonialism or imperialism. What is colonialism and imperialism? Once you remove any kind of moral judgment, you just purely go for description. So if you just purely keep it descriptive, colonialism and imperialism means more effective than less effective people. So colonialism and imperialism means that if your group has been accused of colonialism or imperialism, what your group is being accused of is being effective, being more effective than the losers. So colonialists and imperialists are winners, right? They have won out over losers. So one definition of imperialism is to have influence. So if you are smarter than other people, if you are prettier than other people, if you have any gift that is above average and you deploy that gift, right, you're likely to have some influence. And as such, you are engaged in imperialism. And if you go around fertilizing women with your radioactive seed, you are engaged in colonialism. And if you take some care about the women that you fertilize, all right, you are engaged in eugenics. Scary, scary, scary stuff. All right, so theory of the People's War means the communist theory, the Third World theory. It means the theory of losers, right? Communist, Marxist, Leninism, right? This is the Third World theory of losers, and how, because they have traditionally lost to those who are more effective, the West, they are therefore entitled to break any kind of moral standard. They no longer have to be constrained by any moral standard. They can kill, rape, torture, slaughter civilians because their cause is just, because they're losers, right? This is the ethos of the loser. I'm a loser. My people have consistently lost. Therefore, I am morally entitled to do anything. It's kind of similar to the Trump ethos after the 2020 election, where Trump lost the election and then came out with all these bogus conspiracy theories. And once you bought into them, you were freed from any kind of moral constraints. Once you were freed from any moral constraints, things like January 6th were inevitable, right? If you say that the election system is rigged against your team, then you're saying that your team is no longer bound to any kind of standard of behavior, that you can do anything because the game is rigged against you. And that's the same ethos of the commies, the third worlders, right? The elite theory of the People's War, the guerrilla war. We're losers. We've consistently lost. Therefore, we are free from any kind of moral obligation, right? And that's how people think on the left, who support terrorism and Palestinian rights, right? Throwing in with the Palestinians means you throw in with losers, right? You're a big supporter of the Arabs or of Muslims, right? You're throwing in with those who are consistently losing out. to the West, which is consistently more effective. Right, People's War. And it is a whole new system of morality, a whole new approach to war. Because in the traditional laws of war, you do not gratuitously slaughter and rape civilians. But the loser mentality, the third world mentality, the Palestinian mentality, the Viet Cong mentality is we are free from all moral constraints. Right? You have to be afraid of people with this kind of worldview because there's going to be nothing that holds them back. Right? They will do anything. Right? The Palestinians will do anything. Now, anybody under sufficient stress will do anything to survive. Right? It just requires more stress for more successful people to stoop to doing anything. While people who have no success, right? What would Palestinians be proud of? Like, what are their huge contributions to humanity? They don't have a whole heck of a lot to be proud of. Therefore, they take pride in their loser narrative and how it frees them from any moral constraints. Right, fundamental aspects of the laws of war, the status of national liberation wars, right, completely contradict traditional understanding of the laws of war. But these Viet Cong and Palestinian narratives developed a subtle shift in the interpretation of the laws of armed conflict among the winners. All right, the West, all right, those who have embraced the Viet Cong and the Palestinian narrative and the anti-colonialist, anti-imperialist narrative are embracing the narratives of losers and identifying with losers because losers evoke some sort of special feeling that is so exquisite that it's not available elsewhere, right? That's why identifying with the narrative of the losers is so popular among Western elites, because it appeals to that nurturing instinct. And if you don't have children to nurture, or if you're not particularly interested in nurturing your own children, then the only way you can get those exquisite nurturing feelings taking care of helpless losers, right, and you're not willing to do it the traditional way by having kids or by caring about your kids or devoting yourself to your kids, you've got to have some outlet for that desire to nurture the absolutely helpless and hopeless and the losers. And so for many Western elites who are highly intelligent and highly desirous of the exquisite feels available for caring deeply about the losers, right, the Palestinian cause is one opportunity. And so it doesn't express itself that bluntly and honestly, hey, I support the Palestinians because I get these exquisite feelings from identifying and supporting losers. Right? Nobody says that. But what you instead get is, oh, is Israel conducting itself justly against an enemy who has zero moral constraints? They feel released from all moral constraints because they're losers. And anyone who identifies with the anti-imperialist, anti-colonialist, communist narrative, right, they feel freed from all moral constraints. And think about how much easier life is if you've got nothing to preserve, if you've got no accomplishments to protect, and you have no moral constraints that you need to live up to. You can see why this would be appealing, particularly to both lower IQ people and those high IQ people who are desirous of a particular emotional sensation that's only available by throwing in with the narrative of the losers. So most talk about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is about Israel's nationhood, territory, and how Israel conducts its counterinsurgency against an enemy who knows no moral constraints. So you have growing disapproval of Israel's counterinsurgency tactics among Western elites, right? When Israel fights to defend itself and fights back against terrorists who know no moral constraints, right? You have this widespread worldwide UN majority of nations supporting the guerrillas, the communists, the losers, the terrorists, the Palestinians. And so Western elites, such as Western international lawyers and Western countries, begin to question the legality of counterinsurgency tactics, right? Which are inevitable. If you want to survive and you're fighting a terrorist enemy, you have to employ counterinsurgency or you're not going to survive. So increasingly among Western elites, they question the legality and morality and the legitimacy of Jews wanting to live in the Jewish state, especially when Jews are killing civilian Palestinians in a manner that the elite regards as disproportionate. So there wasn't really a doctrine of disproportion prior to the 1970s. It was there, but it was very minor league. It was at a very minor key. But after the 1970s, particularly since the late 1990s, the number one international elite concern with regard to law is that you don't kill civilians, you minimize the killing of civilians, and your killing of civilians must not be disproportionate. So you have to restrict your military tactics to that which does the least damage to civilians. Like a completely brand new in the history of humanity approach to international law. And what is underneath it is the communist loser narrative that because we're losers and we've consistently lost out to those who are more effective and have developed a higher, more effective, more intelligent form of civilization, we are therefore freed from moral constraints. When you go up against an enemy freed from moral constraints, you have to use effective and often cruel counterinsurgency tactics. So the anti-Vietnam War movement and the pro-Palestine movement launched a comprehensive attack on the traditional understanding of the rules of war and traditional understandings of international humanitarian law, and in particular, a comprehensive attack on the way that the United States and Israel fought back against their terrorist guerrilla opponents who knew no moral sanction. And so you had this growing elite movement among human rights activists and international humanitarian lawyers whose only outlet for particularly distinctive feelings is to side with the loser narratives, to side with the people who know no moral constraints. And the elite in the fields of international humanitarian law and human rights go to war against the United States and Israel. So you get the ginning up of popular protests, you get news media reports that draw attention to what Israel's doing wrong, to what the United States is doing wrong, and how they're being cruel to the terrorists who know no moral limits. And so you have an increasing focus on the suffering of civilians and children when the United States and Israel engage in counterinsurgency. And you have these leading elite Western intellectuals and journalists producing inquiries into these acts. They stage trials judging US campaigns and Israel campaigns. And you have a significant change in the legal discourse by the start of the diplomatic conferences of 1974 to 1977.
Hannah Arendt's Origins of Totalitarianism. This is basically her idea, but he's taken it. You might put it most challengingly like this. Rights were once the first prerogative of citizens, but in our contemporary forms of internationalism, they're the last chance of humans to whom we can't extend citizenship, or who don't have it on their own. Now, even if you want to claim that this distinction is not as great as I'm presenting, it still seems worth reckoning with. If we think about human rights, we typically think about the suffering of other people, typically in the third world, which was never the primary location of talk about the rights of man. And even if there's some continuity, there's some major discontinuity which has to be reckoned with. So it's not on my chart that people hadn't yet discovered our words. They hadn't really stumbled on our project yet. And that's what I want to emphasize. So how did we come to it? Well, leaving ancient history aside, the first stage clearly has to be the 1940s. After all, there is a Universal Declaration of Human Rights then. How do we think about the 1940s? It gets the lion's share of attention. And if you'll permit my religious church history analogy to continue, it's always treated as the moment of Annunciation. And it is the moment when the phrase human rights enters the English language. And it is terrifically important. Now let me turn a bit skeptical for a bit. This typical story that's set on the idea that the 40s are a moment of breakthrough, which would begin already in 1941, before the Americans enter the war with the Atlantic Charter. I don't know if you know what that is, but it's a document that FDR and Churchill produce to say, what is this war about, even though the Americans can't be driven into it until they're bombed. And they say it's about 4 freedoms: the freedoms of speech and religion, and the freedom from want, and freedom from fear, which people tend to think the last means something like a secure world. in which war doesn't continuously crop up. That's seen as the point of origin, although at that point, human rights have not entered high politics. It's not, that phrase has to wait until 1942. Somehow, there's a line traced from that Atlantic Charter through the 1948 Universal Declaration. Now, I want to suggest that we look more closely at the 40s, and instead of seeing them just as simple enunciation, look more carefully at a kind of two big stages in the history of the human rights idea. Now, what does it really mean in these early forms? Because as of 42, FDR does start to talk about it as part of a list. And it's true that American international lawyers do start to get excited about it. And they do things like draft potential lists for an international Bill of Rights in 42 and 3. What do we say about those human rights? I think the first thing to say.
So apparently in Australia now you need a prescription for nicotine products. So Australia is a much less free country than the United States. Australia puts a much higher premium on fairness. Americans put a much higher premium on freedom. So America developed when the Enlightenment project was just getting started, while Australia never had a revolution. It developed after the Enlightenment. It was a different mindset. So Australia, England, New Zealand, countries that emphasize fairness, and so they think it's unfair to make it easy for people to do something destructive, such as to get access to nicotine products. So as an American who's particularly on the right, all right, you're going to find Australia and Europe to be like nanny states compared to your American experience.
Is that they mean something different for most people. Most people understand them to signify that the war is about the creation of social democracy. If you ask people, what are we fighting for? It's against Nazi tyranny, though not the Holocaust. But it's a new order vision. It's what we're fighting for is something positive and will involve some sort of social democracy. The Brits say that. Even FDR, as famously in 1944, gives a State of the Union address in which he announces a second Bill of Rights, which would cover social and economic rights. There's not much implication, actually, if you survey uses in the 40s, that they have an internationalist bearing. True, they define a kind of outcome for all civilized states, but it's fairly clear that it's still going to be the state that's the forum of right, just as before. And actually, FDR has to be pushed in the direction of having international organization, what eventually becomes the United Nations. So it's not obvious, even though international lawyers start to get excited briefly about the idea of human rights, that it involves a kind of drive towards international law or international legal protection. Instead, the dominant meaning in those first couple of years is at home. Now, even worse, we have to see what the relationship of the Atlantic Charter is to the big world. I've been talking about an angle.
So until the 1970s, human rights, it was taken for granted. It was something that a state afforded its citizens. It wasn't just any individual in the world being born and deserving them.
Anglo-American idea. But if you look out at the world, the Atlantic Charter is actually extremely exciting around the world. But it's not because it promises social democracy. Instead, it promises the self-determination of peoples, a collective principle that had been introduced back in the day by Lenin and Wilson. Interestingly, there's a dispute over what that phrase means at the Atlantic.
Right, Lenin meaning Vladimir Ilyich Lenin, the Soviet dictator, and President Woodrow Wilson of the United States.
Charter. Immediately, there's vast enthusiasm around.
So both Lenin and Woodrow Wilson were appalled by colonialism and imperialism
on the world, and that's for sure about the Atlantic Charter because of this self-determination principle. It seems to mean that empire is out. But Churchill doesn't see it that way. The Atlantic Charter is about Hitler's empire, not his empire, and it's not about empire in general. And he actually succeeds in convincing FDR of this fact by the end of the day of FDR's life. And so in a sense, if we look carefully, we see that self-determination and human rights are in a kind of hydraulic relationship. Human rights for most of the world turns out to be a kind of consolation prize. What they're not getting is self-determination, and human rights is given instead. In part because the major powers don't see human rights having any implications for the end of empire. That's quite important. As late as the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, self-determination is not in the idea of human rights. And I think when we look and do a differential history around the world, it shouldn't be surprising that there's such enthusiasm about the Atlantic Charter and almost none about the Universal Declaration outside the North Atlantic zone. And I think that should be sobering. But even at home, there's a story to tell, not about the realization of human rights in the Universal Declaration, but about their scuttling. And I don't want to get into too much detail given the rapidly advancing time, but the story would go roughly like this. There's lots of idealistic talk once FDR is brought around to the idea of international organization about what it will involve. Maybe it will involve human rights. But as of 1944, when the first drafts are announced, or leaked actually.
So Elliot Blatt says, you'll have to take my nicotine from my cold, dead, nicotine-stained hands. I can't beat that line. That's the best. This show cannot improve from that insight. God bless Elliot Blatt. God bless you.